Hey, 42 here. On the 29th of March 1974, farmers were digging a well near the Chinese city of Xi'an when they discovered something remarkable. Buried 5 meters down was a 2,000-year-old human head, expertly sculpted from a kind of kiln-fired clay called terracotta. Further digging revealed a torso and, eventually, an entire life-sized figure, a warrior. Had that been all there was, it would have been an incredible find, but there was more. Buried deep beneath the ground was an entire army made of clay, including chariots, horses, archers, and a complete hierarchy of officers and generals. Archaeologists estimate the number is somewhere north of 8,000. But very few people realised that something even more amazing was buried just a handful of kilometres down the road. When the Terracotta Army was created more than 2 millennia ago, it wasn't just some random piece of really impressive artwork. Those soldiers were built to stand guard over the greatest tomb ever conceived by man. That tomb was built for Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. And this is so utterly outrageous, it doesn't even sound real. For starters, there's the sheer size of the place, covering an area of some 56 square kilometres. That's about the size of Manhattan. It is, by far, the largest tomb ever built. In fact, calling it a tomb doesn't really cover it. The entire complex is essentially a huge underground city, complete with palaces, government buildings, guard towers, and armories. And it's all packed to bursting with priceless artifacts from ancient China. But hang on a second. If Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum is so incredible, why is the army that guards it the bit that's famous? Because, so far as we know, nobody has stepped foot inside Qin Shi Huang's tomb since it was first sealed up more than 2,000 years ago. And here's where things get really interesting. Because the reason nobody has ever attempted to enter what is probably the most important archaeological site on Earth is rather simple. Archaeologists are too scared. Our task in this video is to find out why. The answer involves rivers made of liquid mercury and a bunch of 2,000-year-old booby traps. I told you this tomb was crazy. This is the strange tale of the most surreal archaeological site on Earth, and the surprising reason scientists are too afraid to open it. Now for a quick ad from BootDev. As someone who taught himself to code Python and JavaScript many years ago, I remember how arduous it was. I bought these thick textbooks to read through, and it took me months to make any progress. I really wish that back then I had BootDev. Their immersive platform would have made my learning experience so much quicker and a hell of a lot more fun. You can learn back-end web development from start to finish in Python, SQL, and Go or TypeScript. And you learn to code with BootDev by doing exactly what you'll do at a job: building real projects. They recently launched The Training Grounds, a place where you can grind challenges to give you as much practice as you need before you forge ahead in your coursework. All the while, you'll be accompanied by Boots, a bear wizard, your personal AI tutor that's been trained on every lesson and has full context of what you're learning, so he can help you along if you get stuck. All the content is free to read and watch. A paid membership unlocks interactive features like hands-on coding, AI assistance, progress tracking, and game mechanics. And there's a 30-day, no questions asked refund policy. You can also get a free demo of the interactive experience on every course. You know, programming is such a great profession because programmers often have the option to work remotely. So go to BootDev and use my code 42 to get 25% off your entire first year on the annual plan. Don't miss out. Not much is known about China's first emperor. He was born under the name Ying Zheng in 259 BC, a time when what we now call China was split up into 7 separate states that operated like individual kingdoms, each with its own laws, armies, and customs. Ying Zheng became king of Qin state at the age of just 13. Life is often tough for those thrust into power at a young age. You won't have many friends, and those you do have are usually trying to either control you or kill you. That's certainly how it was for young Ying Zheng. But the boy king dealt with it in his own unique way, by ruthlessly murdering anyone who threatened his power. then murdering their entire families, for good measure. By the time he turned 22, all his enemies were either dead or keeping very quiet. And that left the young king free to fulfill his destiny. And what a destiny it turned out to be. When Ying Zheng came to power in 247 BC, the Seven States had been at near constant war for more than 200 years. He needed just 9 to conquer every single one of them. The Qin had always been strong, but under his young leadership, he transformed them into an unstoppable military and political juggernaut. By the year 221 BC, China was united under a single ruler for the first time in its history. But the young king wasn't satisfied simply to rule his shiny new kingdom. He wanted to transform it entirely. The first order of business was to give himself a suitably grand title. He settled on Qin Shi Huang, Qin for his home state, Shi meaning the first, and Huang, sometimes written Huangdi, meaning something along the lines of God King. Yeah, he might have had an ego problem. With the name sorted, it was time to forge what had been 7 separate kingdoms into a single unified empire. That meant abolishing the old feudal system and murdering any inconvenient kings and nobles who were still knocking around from the other states. It also meant standardizing pretty much everything across the empire, including a new legal system, the writing system, weights and measures, and even the width of axles, so carts from across the empire could easily traverse the kingdom's deeply rutted roads. Speaking of roads, a gigantic new national road network was just one of many major infrastructure projects introduced by the new emperor. Perhaps the most famous involved the extension and improvement of several defensive structures along the kingdom's northern border. Today, we know the result of that project as the Great Wall of China. I could do a whole video on the first emperor's life and legacy, but for this one, I want to focus on his tomb. So let's just leave it at this. Qin Shi Huang utterly reformed almost every aspect of life in China, laying the foundations for more than 2,000 years of imperial rule. You could say he was kind of a big deal. But like many powerful men before and since, there was one thing the emperor feared above all else, an enemy he couldn't defeat with military might or political maneuvering: death. During his reign, he committed a truly astonishing amount of time and money to fuel his new favorite hobby, trying to become immortal. Probably the most famous example of this obsession came when he dispatched an entire fleet east to search for an island called Penglai, where the locals were said to have figured out how to brew the elixir of life. The expedition never returned, probably because the island of Penglai doesn't exist. So, the impatient emperor ordered his court-appointed alchemists to come up with their own recipe for the elixir of life. Qin Shi Huang guzzled these magic potions down like a ravenous badger. They contained all sorts of weird and wonderful ingredients, but one of the most popular was something called cinnabar, a bright red form of the highly toxic mineral mercury sulfide. Historians believe the elixirs very likely played a key role in the emperor's death at the age of just 49. But Qin Shi Huang did not go gentle into that good night. No, long before death turned up for that early appointment, the emperor had secretly decided that should he fail in his quest to become immortal and rule China forever, he'd rule the afterlife for all eternity instead. Almost from the moment he came to power, the 13-year-old Qin Shi Huang had started work on what would become the grandest, most batshit insane mausoleum ever conceived by man. It took an estimated workforce of 700,000 people, almost 4 decades, to build what can best be described as an entire underground kingdom in miniature. It's likely some of them were rewarded for their efforts by being buried alive inside the tomb to ensure its secrets stayed that way. Whilst we don't know for sure what exactly those secrets are, it seems a fairly safe bet that his final resting place is stuffed full of bursting with riches almost beyond imagining. Which leads me neatly back to the question I want to answer in this video. This is very clearly one of the most important archaeological sites on Earth. So why the hell haven't we excavated it yet? The first clue comes from a historian called Sima Qian, who wrote an account of Qin Shi Huang's life about 100 years after his death. Included in that account were some peculiar details about the emperor's tomb. For one thing, he claimed it was protected by a series of booby traps, including hidden crossbows that were primed to shoot at unwary intruders. Sima Qian also claims the tomb contains some kind of map, a representation of ancient China. But not just any map. This cartographical masterpiece apparently featured real flowing rivers made of liquid mercury. Now I know what you're thinking, literal rivers of mercury and ancient booby traps? This isn't Indiana Jones. Most historians agree with you, or at least they used to. But back in the summer of 2020, a new discovery changed everything, because that's when a team of scientists detected significantly elevated levels of mercury vapor, up to 100 times normal levels, in the atmosphere above the main tomb mound. Based on those figures, the team believes there is probably about 100 tons of liquid mercury sloshing around somewhere in his tomb. We won't know for sure, of course, until someone goes inside and takes a look. Until then, it seems as though old Sima Qian was telling the truth. And if he was telling the truth about the rivers of mercury, we should probably also assume he was right about those booby traps as well. There you have it. Scientists haven't excavated the greatest archaeological site on Earth because they're terrified of the dangers that lie within. Or at least that's what the mainstream media would have you believe. Let's start with those booby traps. Whatever mechanisms they rely on, be it tripwires or pressure plates, these things are more than 2,000 years old. The odds that any of them actually still work are practically zero. It's something archaeologists would have to be aware of, but it certainly wouldn't stop them from excavating the tomb. The same can be said for those rivers of mercury. We have hazmat suits for that kind of thing. Just to be clear, excavating the tomb would indeed be a very dangerous job for a whole host of different reasons. But if it isn't booby traps or rivers of mercury that have left archaeologists too afraid to enter the emperor's tomb, what is it? I started this video by talking about the terracotta army as one of the most important archaeological discoveries in history. But here's something you might not know. Back when they were first made, every single one of those 8,000 figures was painstakingly painted in vibrant, lifelike colours. And we know that because that's how they looked when we first dug them out of the ground. But after just 15 minutes of exposure to air and moisture, those snazzy paint jobs began to crumble away into nothing. The very act of bringing the terracotta army into the modern world irreparably damaged it for good. And that, in a nutshell, is why archaeologists are too afraid to open the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. Not because it's physically dangerous, but because it's archaeologically dangerous. That's totally a thing. Like the clay warriors that guard it, the entire tomb complex has been buried in what is essentially a sealed environment for more than 2 millennia. The moment we break that seal, every single artifact inside that tomb will be compromised. There are potentially ways to prevent widespread damage. These days, archaeologists have a whole host of tools and technologies to help preserve the artifacts they dig up, including portable sealed chambers to control the environment, and various protective materials that can be applied the moment an artifact is exposed to the outside world. The trouble is, most of these techniques simply don't apply on this kind of scale. We're talking about one of the largest archaeological sites on Earth. Good luck finding a company who'll build you a hermetically sealed tent the size of Manhattan. Add that to the fact that it really would be an incredibly dangerous excavation. Even if the booby traps aren't working anymore, the mercury poses a genuine risk, and the various chambers that make up the site are likely to be unstable. Put all of this together and you have a project that we simply aren't equipped to take on. And that is the real reason archaeologists are too afraid to open the tomb of China's first emperor. We simply don't have the technology to pull it off without irreparably damaging what's inside. That might not be quite as clickbait headline worthy as rivers of mercury and deadly crossbows, but it's actually really sensible when you think about it. History is littered with examples of archaeologists damaging and in some cases completely destroying the artifacts they dedicated their careers to discovering. In the late 1800s, Heinrich Schliemann utterly obliterated all traces of the ancient city of Troy when he was attempting to excavate. And 50 years later, Howard Carter literally hacked the mummified remains of King Tutankhamun to pieces in order to get them out of the sarcophagus. If they'd had the presence of mind to wait, as modern archaeologists are doing in the case of Qin Shi Huang's tomb, countless irreplaceable artifacts might have been preserved instead of being damaged or destroyed. It's tantalizing to think what wonders lie just out of reach inside Qin Shi Huang's tomb. We could well be talking about the greatest archaeological discovery mankind has ever made. But hard as it may be, it makes a lot of sense to wait this one out. Thanks for watching.